It's the Radio Dawn podcast. I am the aforementioned. The views expressed are mine and mine alone. They do not necessarily reflect the views of the platforms that host this podcast. If you have a problem with what I'm saying, I can't help you. Shall we? Let's. I am beginning my second month of my 70th year on this planet. Sound like the old WOWT Omaha sign-off when they kind of mentioned, this concludes the 78th day of our 64th year in broadcasting. Well, this is almost the beginning of my second month of my 70th year. And having been born in 1955, I remember stuff. And one of the things that I remember is 1968. Now, please excuse me, I do this thing without a net or script. So I am basically relying on my ever so increasingly faulty memory, but I remember 1968. Yes, I remember we had free love and all that sort of stuff, and people doing the dirty in the mud and stuff like that. But I also remember the riots in the summer in various cities. I remember the anti-war protests that had become increasingly, shall we say, intense around the country. I remember people abandoning the current president at the time and aligning themselves with a guy by the name of McCarthy. Not that McCarthy, there's another McCarthy. And then came the father of the guy who may wind up spoiling this election. And people started looking at him because Kennedy. I remember that the civil rights movement had been making great strides in 1968. And so have had the Dixiecrats, or the remnants of them. I don't know how close we were to Civil War, but it was starting to feel, as I said, intense. I remember the Democratic Convention in Chicago. I remember the floor fights, literal floor fights. Dan Rather being pretty much jostled on the floor of the convention. And I don't know if Rather called them that or if Walter Cronkite called them that. I do remember the term jackboot thugs. Richard Daley had become the Donald Trump of his age, and Richard Daley was a Democrat. A union-supporting Democrat. And good God almighty, he was turning into what Trump would like to turn into. The Chicago police had turned into a military operation. We had the Chicago 7. That was going on. A few months later, I was watching an episode of The Flying Nun on my black and white TV. Then ABC News had the temerity to interrupt my continuing fascination with Sally Field, which continues, by the way, to this day. And just telling me that the person that I looked up to almost as much as I did Jesus Christ had been shot in Memphis and killed. No, TikTok, I'm not going to say the word unalived. Here's the deal. For us saving your ass, TikTok, allow us to say words again. I remember the California primary election and the aforementioned father of the possible spoiler of the 2024 election had just won a major victory. People keep forgetting that Kennedy got into the race late. They were thinking that the battle was going to be between Johnson and Eugene McCarthy. But here comes this Kennedy coming up and sucking out all the oxygen in the room. He needed California. And that night, there were problems with the voting machines in California that night. Does that sound familiar? But he won. He gave one of the great acceptance speeches of our time. Walked into the kitchen. I went to bed around about that time. I woke up, turned on the black and white TV that was, basically sitting next to my bed, and found out that while I was sleeping, Robert F. Kennedy Sr. had been shot in the head. The death announcement would come later that day. I remember George Wallace, who was basically being a black kid during that time, was enemy number one. And some guy shot him. He did not die. But two things happened that day. George Wallace was paralyzed from, I guess, the waist down permanently. And I guess, having seen the business side of almost dying, the guy who basically preached segregation now, segregation forever, probably saw Jesus. And maybe it was a good day. Maybe he had a pretty good bowl of oatmeal when he woke up, but I guess God said, okay, we'll give you one more shot. Yeah, he kind of changed after that. Three assassination attempts, 2 were successful, riots all over the place. "1968 was a year of total, complete chaos." But 1968 did not have what 2023 and 2024 have. It doesn't have both sides of the political spectrum saying if the other wins, it would be the end of America and subsequently the end of the planet. We've never had that before. And if this was the world in 1968 that was filled with chaos and death and destruction, and everything else was just normal, can you imagine? What 2024 would be after November? I want you to think about this for about 5 seconds. I really want you to think about this. You've heard everyone say what could happen if Trump lost and the MAGAs would not accept this lying down. And what could happen with that? Because to them, this is their last chance. But I also want you to think about this. What would happen if Trump won? What would happen with the other caged animals in the zoo, backed up to the corner? Would they accept this as, well, we lost, better luck next time, because we've already convinced ourselves there would be no next time? If you are non-heterosexual, if you are non-cisgendered, if you are minimally melanin challenged, you might say, if you were not in the Christian minority, if you were a woman, hell, if you were a man, I mean, a lot of people think that the stuff they are planning is only going to affect women and children and gay folk and trans folk. Men are going to get it too, because it's going to be enforced conformity. What would people do then? Backed up against the wall. Would people accept it? If you're facing death, actual death, I don't know what you would do. I can tell you what I would do. I would just stay in my apartment and wait till the end. Stay out of people's way, because I am that much of a coward. And obviously, the number of people who would resist would be, compared to the average population, rather minute. But it only takes one person to topple everything down. Phyllis Schlafly was one person, and she basically almost destroyed this country with her rigid right-wing thoughts and beliefs. Same thing with the person who is running the libs of TikTok. It took 7 people from across the pond to bring down the biggest building in America. In Oklahoma City, it only took one guy and an F-150 filled with fertilizer. When backed up against the wall, there's no guarantee of what people will or will not do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is scary. And for those people who think that Trump's loss would start the second Civil War, let me tell you, if you lived in Los Angeles this week and saw the protests that turned into riots, the war has already started. The war has been ongoing for the last 20 years. We just haven't, linked it all together. The Murrah Building, Waco, Branch Davidians, a lot of stuff. The Second Civil War has already started. What happened to our cities after the Floyd killings? The George Floyd killings. We are in the Second Civil War right now. And I am afraid of what will happen at the end of this. Do I have any solution? Do I have any way out of it? I'm just a guy doing a poor excuse of a podcast from his bed in a small apartment in Southern California. I have no answers. But the first starting point to find the answers is to recognize what the question is. And we've got 6 months until this thing escalates. We better get to work on solving it now. Just a quick reminder that because of all the things going on with social media, things change all the time, and I would like for you to follow me wherever I go. The easiest way to do that is to go to my link tree, and that is linktr.ee/Radio Don. All one word, Radio Don. Again, that's linktree/Radio Don, linktr.ee/RADIODON. Don't forget the dot. We will talk to you again soon. Take care.